Hi guys, so I think this is a topic we will be returning to on a regular basis. What the hell happened to trade post-Brexit? Brexiteers have been banging on for some time now that all British businesses have to do post-Brexit is to expand their horizons. Look further afield. Yes, Brexiteers, by voting for their pet project, have thrown all types of obstacles in the way of trade. But many of them have no understanding of international business or import-export, but they believe that the simple solution is just to trade with someone else. It can take years and even decades to build up a robust supply chain. It can take some time for businesses to build up trust and goodwill with both suppliers and customers. That isn't something that can be replicated overnight. Also, the fact that in the Brexiteer mindset, just switching to the Far East or South America is the solution demonstrates their complete lack of knowledge on the subject. It appears a sizable amount of imports from the EU have disappeared and will not be replaced. The issues are likely to become more acute because many checks will only come into effect over the coming months. Thomas Sampson from the London School of Economics said the decrease has been worse than expected. Yes, there was the belief that trade would slow down in January, but not to this extent. He said, and I quote, "There are still frictions that exist, but it's slightly surprising to see such a fast drop-off, given that we haven't actually seen the customs border come into place on the UK side. This is a real concern. Remember that the British government have been basically waving lorries through as they cross in from the continent. This action is not sustainable in the long term. Checks will have to come, and when they do, it will harm imports in a somewhat similar way that exports have been harmed this year." Now, it must be also remembered that Brexit is harming businesses in Europe too. They are losing money as trade is dropping off with Britain. However, EU member states have others to trade with. Many have been realigning their businesses since 2016, something that has been very difficult to do for UK-based enterprises. Sampson also described another problem related to this. The difference in the changes of EU imports versus non-EU imports is not because firms have suddenly found wonderful new import sources from around the world. It's because their trade costs have gone up with the EU. These extra trade costs have really hit areas such as chemicals, machinery and food. A big issue with food is that we tend to think of fresh fruit and vegetables, and yes, they have been deeply impacted by Brexit. But what also must be taken into account is the ingredients used to make food in the UK. They have also suffered as a result of problems stemming from Brexit. Delays due to the lack of heavy goods vehicle drivers means food is going bad before it arrives at the customer's site, meaning more and more British companies are ending up scrapping orders. Now, Brexiteers are still attempting to use the pandemic as an excuse for all of this, but the opposite is happening, as restrictions are easing is putting more pressure on a smaller pool of haulage companies. Even businesses that would like to export around the world still need to get their goods to the port, which requires lorries. See the problem here? There's a real supply and demand issue also with the haulage industry, it seems, as fewer drivers demand higher wages. And as I've shown you before in interviews with the likes of the Road Haulage Association, these logistic companies operate on very tight margins. Any extra cost for drivers will be passed on to the consumer if the business is still viable. Brexit is really having a cascading effect on trade. Some within the logistics industry have been saying that smaller operators will be pushed out, as they don't have the capacity to operate. Even if this problem facing haulage is eventually resolved either by the UK government easing its immigration restrictions on drivers from the EU, there is of course the problem of Brexit red tape. As I've said before, the UK is operating a pretty much open border when it comes to trade and customs checks. The Brexit mantra of taking back control seems to involve some can kicking. Michael Gove back in March this year said that the government was planning not to introduce checks until October, with them being fully imposed next March. We have seen how businesses have been forced to fend for themselves. This is probably going to be the case again over the next year as they struggle with more and more paperwork. Traders are also required to keep records, but do not have to submit customs declarations until next year. So this gives them some breathing space. Let's hope that the companies have all their paperwork filled out correctly. There may be some leeway given, but it would be surprising if some companies not having their paperwork in order don't face expensive fines. Trade in the short term is expected to be bumpy with the European Union, but eventually things will improve. It will never be as it was before, while Great Britain stays out of the single market and the customs union. Also, as businesses adapt to finding new suppliers and customers outside the EU, it would require another mountain of work to shift back to operating within Europe. Businesses will adapt or die. This has always been the case. However, large companies, as I said before, can take a financial hit like this when it comes to paperwork or processes. Small and medium-sized enterprises will struggle. The wild card, of course, is how the British government will react. Will their approach to business change? Will they attempt to help out companies that are struggling? Or will their approach be fundamentally Brexit? Disaster capitalism, allowing the big fish to swallow up everything in sight. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot. I want to say a big thank you to all of my patrons. You ensure that this channel continues to exist. I'm eternally grateful for all of your support. If you join Patreon, you will receive instant access to our Discord server, where we have both audio and video chats. You can chat with me and other patrons, where we discuss important and non-important issues. Becoming a patron per month costs about the same as a large coffee, so why not check it out?